Buddhism, a talk given by the Venerable Dr. K. Sri Damananda Nayakatera at the University of Malaya.
What is Buddhism is the subject that we are going to discuss today. The Dhamma taught by the Buddha more than 2,500 years ago forms the solid base of Buddhism. There are some people who try to condemn or confuse you, saying that Buddhism is not a religion. Some others say it is only a philosophy. Then again some others say there is no philosophy in Buddhism, but it is only a way of life. Yet others acknowledge it as a religious way of life. However, whatever definition they give in English, I think all of you know that the Buddha did not preach in English to use the word religion. Now, let us define the meaning of this word religion. According to the dictionary, some of the definitions are given as belief in God or way of worship or praying to God, obedience to God, binding man to God, practice of sacred rites, recognition of a higher unseen controlling power or powers with the emotion and morality and monastic life. When we consider about these definitions, there are some with which we can agree and some others which are not acceptable to Buddhism. Therefore, there is no difficulty to introduce Buddhism as a religion. Today, people give more and more new definitions to this word to face the modern challenge to religion. If we can introduce religion as a method or way of life to lead a righteous, noble, or respectable life by maintaining human dignity and intelligence for a peaceful, happy, contented life, and to attain final liberation through mental purity, I believe that there won't be a controversy regarding this word. On the other hand, why should we argue on this word created by man according to his way of thinking to practice a method for our peace and happiness? If the method is correct, useful and effective, and if we can see the result through our own experience without depending on mere belief or imagination, then that is more than enough for us to satisfy in order to practice that method. According to the definitions of philosophy, it is difficult to interpret Buddhism as a mere philosophy because the views expressed by many of those thinkers regarding our life, world, universe, and nature remain as ideas, but not as a practical method in our day-to-day life. But the Buddha's teaching is not a philosophy of such nature. It is a practical method philosophized by the Buddha through his wisdom and analytical knowledge. Therefore, only certain aspect of his teaching can be regarded as philosophy. The Buddha's doctrine of analysis is not based on views or theories, but through understanding and his own experience. On the other hand, many of those views given by different philosophers contradict each other. In their philosophy, it is hard to find an all-embracing goodwill and compassion, but mere intellect. The Buddha's doctrine is not a dry philosophy just for people to talk about. Western scholars try to introduce Buddhism as a way of life, since the concept of God is insignificant in the Buddha's teaching. But this interpretation is insufficient to convey the dispensation or the message disseminated by the Buddha. Buddhism is a righteous way of life for man to do good, to be good, to lead a happy life without depending on external powers to find peace or calmness and tranquility. No matter under what title people used to name this religion, the Buddha Dhamma remained as absolute truth. Let me start from the beginning to explain as to how we are going to build up a practical Buddhist way of life. It is not easy for us to turn our normal way of life overnight to a religious life. The Buddhist way of life is a gradual development. That is why many people, mostly young people and children, pay more attention toward the cultural aspect to practice a religion. Cultural practices influence human mind to appreciate and promote a religion. Although religious rites, rituals and ceremonies are condemned by intellectuals, such practices are important to develop and maintain the devotional aspect and to create inspiration amongst the masses who are not advanced in intellectual understanding in the deep aspect of Buddhism. We know that some illustrations, amusement and entertainment are important to many, especially young people, to understand certain aspects of Buddhism according to their understanding capacity, age and education. Through such practices, it is easy to introduce moral lessons. Certain performances which depict the Buddhist stories can create inspiration in the young mind. But after learning the Dhamma, it is not necessary to cling to them to lead a Buddhist way of life. In the devotional practices, there are various methods to cultivate dedication and concentration. Without cultivating devotion in the mind, many people do not know how to appreciate and experience the value of a religion. If there is no devotional aspect in Buddhism, people may develop some other kind of belief which are more superstitious or end up in blind faith. There must be some sort of harmless or reasonable practices for people to uphold to avoid this situation. Otherwise, Buddhism can become a very boring subject to many people, or else people may regard this like an ordinary subject that they have studied in the school without developing devotion and respect. So, it is difficult to practice a religion without devotion because human beings must have something to satisfy their emotion. Hymn singing, chanting, doing some offerings with devotion and religious festivals are some of the important practices to make religion to be a living religion. That is why in Asian countries, cultures have become part and parcel of their life. However, devotion and culture also can become shaky unless they develop confidence through proper understanding, because changes in human emotion can take place through the influence of some other sources. Intellectual consideration is another aspect to value the teaching of the Buddha and the Buddhist practices. By using our human intelligence, we analyze his teaching and reason out to justify the Buddhist concept and realize the truth to gain confidence. The confidence that we gain through this understanding is more stable than the faith. Through this intellect, we try to gain proper understanding of our life, the nature of the worldly condition and phenomena. Buddhism contributes more than enough doctrine, philosophy and psychology to have proper understanding of our life and to adjust our way of life to live peacefully. Then we can appreciate the nature of the Buddha's wisdom or enlightenment and the value of the truth as expounded by the Buddha as the Dhamma. But this knowledge or intellectual aspect does not purify the mind for us to be perfect, because perfection is the most difficult and the ultimate achievement in our life. The knowledge of the Dhamma itself does not train the mind to cultivate great humane qualities, mental discipline and purity. Therefore, culmination of spiritual aspect is the last step in order to experience the unchangeable and ultimate achievement in the Buddhist way of life. This spiritual aspect is nothing but mental culture. The realizations of absolute truth will be gained through mental purification. When we have achieved this purity, important virtues such as honesty, selfless service, kindness, understanding, patience, tolerance will prevail in the mind to lead a noble life. Then the concept of self has no place in that mind. The mind becomes very bright and a dynamic force which can be directed for any good purpose to experience peace and happiness, and also to do some service to others without having any ulterior motive. So, The ultimate aim of Buddhist way of life is not to gain sensual pleasure or heaven, but to develop the mind to its climax until it gains its complete purity and perfection. That is called the final goal in our life. Otherwise, life has no ultimate aim. At the moment, whether we are good or bad, in a worldly sense, all of us have an intrinsic, hidden animal nature, human nature, and divine nature. In our behavior, to satisfy our worldly needs, we adapt some attitude according to one of these natures. If our minds were not properly trained and guided according to our religious discipline, very often we use animal nature. According to anthropology also, we can understand as to how humans maintain animal instinct within them. Although evolutions of the physical structure has been changed, the mental current of certain habits and behavior patterns continue and still remain. Some of them remain subdued, yet human emotion and craving arouse them and influence the mind to flare up according to circumstances. Religion is important to subdue this animal nature. Human beings have a mind to think or to reason out. In that mind, there is human intelligence. When the mind is deluded by illusion, it is difficult to use the human mind properly. That is why religion has to play an important role to develop this mind to understand things clearly and to cultivate humane qualities so as to lead a gentle life. Simply by praying to supernatural powers, no one can develop divine nature without cultivating virtues in human life. Divine nature is the refined human mind to lead a noble life. This is called the sublime state of the mind. Some others may introduce it as a divine state. But from the Buddhist point of view, there is no external divine inspiration to influence the mind to be noble. It is only development of the mind after eradications of hatred, jealousy, and selfishness. At that stage, mind radiates more goodwill or friendship, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, or an unbiased mind without any discrimination. As human beings, we must know how to cultivate our way of life to the highest level by upholding all the good humane qualities and eradicating human weaknesses. That is the highest achievement in our life. This is the way the Buddha has advocated the Buddhist way of life. But some others may say it is not necessary for people to eradicate all their human weaknesses or to cultivate all the virtues or the purity of the mind in order to gain salvation. Be faithful to God and pray to Him. If people develop this faith, all their sins will be forgiven, and after their death, there is nothing for them to worry about with regard to their future life, because God will send their souls to heaven for eternal rest. To them, that is the ultimate goal in life. This kind of belief or concept, which some people try to introduce as religious way of life, is not acceptable to Buddhism, because Buddhism teaches that real religious way of life is based on moral development and mental training, and not through belief in God or praying or worshipping. Mere belief in the Buddha or paying homage or doing some offering to the Buddha are insufficient to be a good Buddhist. People can contribute a great deal for peaceful coexistence and to maintain confidence and happiness by leading a respectable life, by developing their goodwill, compassion, harmony and understanding. The duty of a religion is to train human mind to achieve this end, and also to guide humanity for the spiritual development, which is more superior to any kind of worldly gain. Life without spiritual development is uncertain and not beneficial to ourselves and to others as well. All our worldly problems are caused by worldly-minded, selfish people. Those who try to introduce their religion as a way of life by concentrating more on worldly material development, thinking that everything that is related to man's life as a religious way of life, merely mix up worldly life and religious life. Later, religion may lose its original identity and its main purpose, or else man becomes a slave in the name of religion and abuses his human dignity. Buddhism says, for worldly material gain there is one method, but for spiritual development there is another method. Therefore, we should not regard material gain as religious development. At the same time, we should not practice our religion in such a way that will hinder material growth. The duty of a religion is to guide mankind to achieve their material gain without in any way violating the peace and happiness of others. Another practical method to start Buddhist way of life is by cultivating dana, sila and bhavana, by practicing charity or sacrificing something for the welfare of others in order to reduce selfish desire or greed, upholding morality for self-discipline by leading a harmless and respectable life, and training the five senses not to become slaves to them in order to indulge in the sense pleasures. This kind of discipline trains one's own mind and at the same time allow others also to live peacefully. Develop mental culture to control mental purities in order to maintain peace and happiness. When these three stages are completed, a person can become a perfect religious man. The Buddha prescribed this Buddhist way of life in a practical way. Mere belief in anything is not Buddhism. At the same time, the Buddha did not impose any religious laws or commandments for people just to obey, nor did he introduce a code of religious punishment for those who violate religious principles. He never condemned or cursed anybody who did not agree to follow his advice. His way of teaching is not to create temptation in man's mind by talking about paradise as a reward for a religious life. Nor did he create fear in the people's mind by talking about hellfire for those who did not accept his teaching. Instead, he advised people to practice his teaching by realizing the value of good conduct and to give up evil practices by knowing the danger of the bad effect with which we are all concerned. The basic pillars of Buddhism are Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. That is, morality, concentration, and realization or wisdom. It is impossible to cultivate the Buddhist way of life and experience peace, calm, and happiness without developing these three basic principles. The whole teaching of the Buddha is based on these three pillars. The Dhamma taught by the Buddha for 45 years was recorded by his disciples and named as Tripitaka, which was divided into three sections: Sutra, Vinaya, and Abhidhamma. Conventional or simple teaching consisting all the important advice to lead a noble life is called Sutra. Disciplinary code for those who have renounced the worldly life to lead a pure monastic life is called Vinaya. Moral psychology or analytical explanation of the mind and the element is called Abhidhamma. But all these teachings are nothing but analysis of Sila, morality, Samadhi, concentration, and Panya, wisdom or realization. However, wisdom is not knowledge. In our book knowledge or academic knowledge, there is no wisdom. Wisdom arises through mental development. It is the realizations of every existing thing in its proper perspective through penetrative knowledge. We can achieve this wisdom only by harnessing the purified mental energy. That is why meditation is very important to develop the mind to gain this wisdom. When proper realization appears, mind becomes an unshakable dynamic force. This cultivated and strengthened mind can face any human problem or worldly conditions. It will never create anxieties, worries and miseries, and can understand the cause of natural occurrences without allowing the mind to generate fear or hatred. This mind, with wisdom, is free from mental illusion or hallucination. However, it is not easy to gain this kind of higher wisdom unless proper mental training or purification is achieved. We can use our knowledge and understanding to face many of our human problems and also to overcome them. Even then, worldly knowledge alone does not give us a permanent solution to stop our worldly problems. Buddhism is a liberal religion in that it guides us to lead a normal life without suffering in the name of religion, by not becoming slaves to sense pleasure, nor by becoming slaves to any supernatural power, but by cultivating human dignity, virtues, and intelligence until super wisdom is gained. Buddhism also does not encourage people to depend on supernatural or miraculous powers for a spiritual development. Whatever people believe as miraculous powers and mystical powers never give us wisdom or mental purity. The Buddha did not want us to follow the same age-old traditional belief based on mythology introduced by the primitive people as a religious way of life. He, however, expounded a rational and a noble way of life as a religion for people to practice without abusing human intelligence and experience the result within this life and hereafter. The Buddha's approach to the problem of human suffering is essentially empirical and experimental and not speculative and metaphysical. The Buddhist way of life is reasonable and practical at any time, in any society and in any country, which does not create any discrimination or disturbances with the followers of other religions. Buddhism is the direct result of a most intensive research voluntarily conducted over a long period of time by most kind-hearted noble prince who imbued with infinite love and deep compassion for suffering humanity. It should best be described as a psychology, or even more appropriately a mental therapy. From the Buddhist point of view, religion is not something that has come down from heaven to fulfill a divine purpose, but something that has grown up on earth to satisfy the deepest of human need, peace and happiness. It is not dependent on mere faith, but on the understanding of experience through use of human intelligence or supreme wisdom. Buddhism is a gradual path of mental evolution which ultimately leads to perfection or liberation. Buddhism says the suffering that we experience is nothing but a clash between our selfish desire and worldly conditions or reality. One who knows how to train his mind can overcome this problem. Buddhism is not something to experience good results only in our next life, but to gain satisfaction while we are here. It is not a kind of escapist asceticism, but a down-to-earth realism. Religious life only can be established when man is ready to accept responsibilities for himself and others, but not through the belief or reward or punishment. According to the Buddha, man is capable of rising above all human weaknesses by cultivating a divine mind through his own effort. The Buddha is not regarded as a savior in the same sense normally believed by others. Buddhists regard him as a savior since he has shown the path for man to save himself. The destiny of man is not determined by the whims of a supreme being, but by the result arising out of his thoughts, words, and actions. According to Buddhism, our existence does not begin with this human life, nor does it end with this life in eternal heaven or hell thereafter, but has been evolving since the beginning of time in countless numbers of various existences according to our accumulated karma or cause and effect. This will continue until the whole process is understood and gradually brought to a standstill. That is the final goal. Nibbana, taught in Buddhism as the ultimate bliss, is not a mystical bliss, but a rather perfect sanity which goes beyond the normal sanity defined in a worldly sense. If we can understand ourselves, we can easily understand what Buddhism is. You may go round the world in searching of Buddhism, but eventually you have to concentrate and reflect on yourself to understand Buddhism. This is the method prescribed by the Buddha as meditation. Real Buddhists do not worry about circumstances here or hereafter, but only concern themselves about their mental states here and now. If we look after the present state of mind, the future will look after itself. In the Buddha's teaching, there is nothing that could be pointed out as being out of date, since modern scientific discoveries do not contradict with Buddhism. This religion does not condemn other religionists as sinners, but respects the other religious teachers. According to Buddhism, forgiveness of sins by a supernatural being is not justifiable. It, however, teaches us how to overcome the effect of certain evil deeds that we have committed. This we achieve by doing more and more meritorious deeds, but not by merely praying to anybody. This is a religion for people to practice according to their own conviction and understanding, and not because of fear or eternal hellfire. Buddhism teaches that both enjoyment and sufferings are temporary but not eternal. According to the Buddha, the present life is not the first and the last. The life process continues so long as craving for existence prevails in the mind. And this craving in turn accumulates good and bad karmic forces in the mind. Hence, existence takes place again due to these same forces. The summary of the Buddha's teaching is mentioned in brief and in simple language. Do not do evil deeds, do good, purify the mind. This is the message of every Buddha. When we consider this simple yet noble message, we can understand the real meaning of Buddhism. Is there any sane person in this world who can say that something is wrong in this religion? Whatever we believe, according to our way of thinking and practice in the name of Buddhism, this is the way the Buddha had advised us to practice this religion. The Buddhas appear in this world from time to time, but all the enlightened Buddhas convey the same message. The Buddhas have no different messages. This message is not a divine message, but a sublime message. Through this noble message, we understand how to mold our life to be perfect. We must understand that there are 5 religious principles for lay people to observe in their daily life. This means doing their normal work or household duties without violating these 5 religious principles. They have to cultivate their way of life. They are abstaining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, telling lies, and taking intoxicating drinks and drugs. However, evil deeds are not confined only to these 5 items. There are many others, but it is better to try not to violate these 5 moral principles for a beginning, because this religious way of life is a gradual development. Peace and security can be maintained by upholding these religious principles. The main purpose of the observance of this moral code is to cultivate humane qualities and development of certain virtues such as kindness, honesty, and proper understanding, but not because of the fear of punishment. If people uphold these precepts only by thinking of the punishment, there is no sympathetic feeling or understanding in their minds. Buddhism encourages people to observe these precepts with such understanding, then they cultivate moral development without maintaining selfish ideas of punishment. That is the real meaning of the Buddha's saying, not to do evil. As human beings, it is our duty to do some service to others. We render our service through generosity, kindness, by giving our helping hand to others who need our support to get rid of their grievances, worries, and many other problems. By doing some service to others, we also reduce our selfishness. On the other hand, if we develop some ulterior motive to gain something in return, such as reward for our services, then again we develop selfishness. So the real Buddhist concept of not to do evil and to do good are not based on punishment and reward, but to reduce selfish ideas. Although we have cultivated our mind to avoid evil and to do good, our minds are still not completely purified. Under certain circumstances, our hidden greed, anger, and illusion can be agitated and influence the mind to commit some bad deeds. Therefore, we had to purify our mind by eradicating such mental impurities in order to be perfect. This is the way to reach the final goal. Clear understanding of Four Noble Truths is the most significant feature in Buddhism, namely, realizations of the nature of suffering, cause of suffering, freedom of suffering, and the method to practice in order to achieve full freedom. Without developing our understanding on these four important factors, we can never realize the nature of our human problems, and forever we have to go on suffering, struggling for our survival, and yet never find the way to get rid of our unsatisfactoriness. This realization is the most important aspect in Buddhism. Those who are ignorant of these Four Noble Truths create their own conception of worldly problems. Buddhism is the only religion which gives a clear exposition of the Four Noble Truths. They are the absolute truths. That is why the Buddha says that these are noble truths, because many other concepts that we accept as truth never remain forever as truth. Those who try to understand these truths also naturally become noble. When we analyze these four kinds of truth, we can understand that suffering is nothing but our feeling of unsatisfactoriness of everything. The cause of it is natural, but not created by anybody. We know that in every existing element and energy, friction, clashes, imbalance, disagreement, and changes take place. When this situation is involved with human emotion, we experience this as unsatisfactoriness according to our unsatisfied desire. So, every moment we experience these states physically and mentally. Through scientific analysis also, this has been proven. That is why intellectuals say that Buddhism is a scientific religion. On the other hand, the main cause of existence as visible object is also caused by this friction. However, when the changes are not in our favor, then we experience unhappiness. It is called suffering. Now we can understand that suffering is natural. Therefore, our duty is to find out the cause of this suffering. The Buddha says, the cause is nothing but our own craving for existence and sense pleasures. Buddhists have no ground to believe that cause of it is our original sin. Nor do they believe that it is due to a curse or influence by any god, devil or ghost. People experience suffering by developing their selfish desire and then experience worries, fear, and disappointment. By realizing this truth, they can get rid of their unhappiness only by reducing their craving. But they will never get the chance to avoid their suffering by feeding the craving or by adopting any other method. Complete freedom from birth, decay, worries, miseries, and unsatisfactoriness of everything to maintain peace, happiness, calmness, and tranquility is called nirvana. This is the final goal that the Buddha experienced and developed. It is impossible to gain this nirvanic bliss by cherishing and entertaining our desire. After realizing the cause of suffering and the freedom that we can gain by eradicating this main cause, we have to find out the method practiced by the Buddha. This method or path is called the Eight Noble Paths. These Eight Noble Paths are for us to practice. Without practicing, no one can experience real bliss. They are right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This noble method we can find only in the Buddha's teaching. This method completely purifies the human life and enables us to be perfect and noble. There is no doubt about the difficulties that people have to face when they are going to practice this method. Yes, good things are difficult to practice, but bad things are very easy. Some people try to find out a simple and easy method to gain complete satisfaction in their life. But without following this path, whatever belief and concept they maintain as correct methods they will never gain complete satisfaction or freedom in their life. This noble way of life is not only for those who profess Buddhism, but for all mankind. Cause and effect, or moral causation, is being introduced as kamma or karma in Buddhism. This is another important aspect for us to ponder in order to understand the cause of inequalities among the mankind. Our wholesome or unwholesome thoughts, words and actions create karma. Moral causality is another definition for karma. Whatever we do intentionally as volitional activities by influencing the mind, either with good thoughts or bad thoughts, create good or bad karma. These karmic forces create good and bad results, either within this lifetime or hereafter. This karmic law is a universal law, but not created by any external forces or God. Science says every action has its own reaction. This is another aspect in Buddhism to enlighten us to know as to how people experience discriminations or inequalities physically and mentally. Buddhism never supports the belief that God and devil are responsible for our discriminations. Pleasant and unpleasant feelings are not created by a God as a reward or punishment, but follow as a natural effect of our own good and bad action. This is the nature of karma, or cause and effect, expounded by the Buddha. Everybody experiences the good and bad effect of their action, whether people believe it or not, no matter whether they profess a religion or not. To the Buddha, man is not an experiment in life created by a supernatural being to be done away with when unwanted. Buddhism is not a mumbo-jumbo business or cock and bull story to entertain human emotion or to pander to the human mind, but a rational, liberal and noble method for those who have a mind to understand, practice and experience. Buddhist cosmology explains how different kinds of living beings exist in different forms, visible or invisible, in other parts of the universe. Modern astronomy acknowledges this exposition. How rebirth is possible without the concept of an eternal soul is another religious revolution in Buddhism. All the other religions, before or after the Buddha, strongly uphold the belief in a soul, because without depending on a soul, there is nothing very much for them to talk about life hereafter. But Buddhism very clearly explains how rebirth can take place without the concept of a soul. According to Buddhism, belief in a soul is the misinterpretation or misunderstanding of human consciousness. To understand the Buddhist interpretation of rebirth, one must learn Buddhist psychology or the nature of mental faculties and the nature of the karmic forces and cosmic energies. Mere belief in rebirth never gives the clear picture of rebirth. Reincarnation or transmigration of souls are not Buddhistic terms. Belief in a Creator God is the most important concept to the followers of every religion other than Buddhism. To them, there is no religion without God and no life without God. Although Buddhism does not deny the existence of such gods, the concept of God in Buddhism is entirely different from others. Buddhists work for their salvation by leading a noble religious life and through mental purification without depending on any God. Yet, they do respect God. Purity in Buddhism is not based on physical phenomenology, but psychological purity. Although others condemn Buddhists by calling names such as heathens, pagans, and idol worshippers, Buddhists never condemn the followers of other religions. While practicing their own religion, Buddhists can respect other religions. They can agree to disagree with other religionists to avoid conflict and hostility, and can compromise with them while upholding their own Buddhist concept. So far, I have explained the fundamental teachings of Buddhism, its purpose, concept, method to be practiced, the ultimate goal of life, as well as how to overcome difficulties, the Buddhist attitude towards various other sources, how intellectuals respect this profound teaching, and how narrow-minded people condemn this religion. The tolerance in Buddhism has been misused by many Buddhists to maintain certain meaningless traditional practices, so much so that non-Buddhists have come to regard Buddhism as a superstitious belief. Since Buddhism does not command people to do away with age-old traditions in order to practice this religion, people have taken advantage of this by following many kinds of practices which are not congenial to the teachings of the Buddha. In various countries where Buddhism spread, the followers have incorporated many of those existing practices into Buddhism and eventually introduced as Sri Lankan Buddhism, Thai Buddhism, Burmese Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, Korean Buddhism, Japanese Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, and European Buddhism. But Christianity and Islam commanded their followers to do away with many of such former beliefs and minimize their traditional practices. On the other hand, the Buddhist attitude towards traditional practices, which are regarded as part of their culture, has become a stumbling block towards Buddhist unity and also created a superiority feeling which led to discrimination amongst the followers of Buddhism in their respective countries. At the same time, each group tried to glorify that their form of Buddhism is far superior to the others. But they do not realize that they are exposing their own egoism in the name of Buddhism. However, the remarkable Buddhist tolerance contributed to the maintenance of peace, healthy religious atmosphere amongst the different other religious groups and various denominations of the same Buddhist group without any bloodshed for the last 2,500 years is highly commendable. At the beginning, different schools of Buddhism sprang up due to different opinions they held regarding certain aspects of Buddha's teaching, but not for their personal gain or power, nor with any ulterior motive. Later on, the followers changed this attitude, and it seems today they are trying to introduce their own Buddhism with some ulterior motive. The Buddha's message, which we introduce as Buddhism, is meant for all mankind and not for one particular country. If people can understand this, there is nothing for them to talk about Chinese Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, or any other kind of Buddhism, because Buddhism means truth. If it is so, one particular group cannot monopolize the truth. Regarding our traditions and customs, the Buddha's advice was neither to accept nor to reject without considering whether or not such practices are meaningful or useful to all concerned. To introduce our own tradition and customs through Buddhism, we should not brand Buddhism by using the name of our respective countries, which can create disharmony and misunderstanding. In order to reinforce their own Buddhist labels, they also have incorporated many kinds of magical powers, mystical powers, and supernatural powers by introducing charms and many other sources to influence the ordinary masses by disregarding what the Buddha has said with regard to such practices. They emphasize more on these practices and introduce them as Buddhism. They also try to create more confidence in the mind of others by saying that the Buddha had revealed those practices secretly to some of his disciples. But before his passing away, the Buddha had proclaimed that there were no secret doctrine in his teaching and that he had revealed all the important guidelines to lead a proper noble religious life. Therefore, such practices are not prescribed in the original Pali Tripitaka. In this way, they have neglected intellectual and spiritual development in Buddhism. They realize that it is only through these practices they can gain more popularity. Some others try to accommodate all those different kinds of belief and practices to show others that they are working for religious harmony amongst the different schools of Buddhism. However, it can hardly be said that their motive is to promote harmony. If they were to practice Buddhism in that way, it is difficult to understand what they are trying to introduce as the basic teaching or the absolute truth of the Master. However, that is not the correct attitude to show tolerance towards the other schools of Buddhism. One must have his own principles according to his own conviction by following the guidelines given by the Buddha. We can practice Buddhism according to our education and understanding without showing any hostility towards other schools or other religions. Those who try to introduce all the other traditions, belief and customs as practiced or adapted in different countries are like those who are trying to take different kinds of medicine, such as Western medicine, Indian medicine, Chinese medicine, and other native medicine together when they are sick. Instead of getting cured, such attitude can aggravate the sickness. That is why we must have a method to practice Buddhism with confidence. In a country like Malaysia, people are facing another problem when they are going to practice this religion. Some of those religious masters, preachers and gurus who come from other countries try to introduce Buddhism according to their own belief, traditions and customs, and say that only their way of practice is more effective and purer than the others. While appreciating their services, we would like to mention that local people create a still more misunderstanding and confusion after listening to many of those visiting religious masters. This situation has created more confusion and has become a big problem, especially amongst the younger generation and the beginners to understand what Buddhism is. The best advice that we can give to avoid this conflict is to study the basic teaching of the Buddha before they attempt to follow those masters. On the other hand, Buddhism in Malaysia consists of many cultural, traditional, religious beliefs and practices. Elders pay more attention to their traditional practices, while Western-orientated young people try to learn the significance of such practices and to develop the intellectual aspect. At the same time, some others remain as free thinkers. young Buddhists in this country have had no facilities to learn their religion, even in Buddhist temples. Temple authorities maintain their temples only as places of worship, but not as a place to educate people. Those who had their education in missionary schools do not know how to appreciate Buddhism, because many of them were influenced by other religionists through indoctrination. Some of those cultural practices have become a mockery in the eyes of those who are not familiar with Buddhist practices. Some others always condemn the Buddhist practice of paying homage to the Buddha in front of a Buddha image as mere idol worship. This is a very big issue to them, but they do not know the significance of paying respect to a master who had taught them how to lead a noble and religious life. They do not know how to appreciate the enlightenment, perfection, wisdom, sacredness, and the noble services rendered by the Buddha. That is why they bring forward this criticism to condemn the Buddhist attitude of keeping an image and paying respect. On the other hand, paying respect to an image is not an indispensable act in Buddhism. The Buddha image is not compulsory for a Buddhist to become a good Buddhist. This is only a devotional aspect. It is difficult to understand why others take advantage of a statue to condemn a gentle religion. However, when we observe the way how some of our Buddhists practice this religion, it is difficult to say that they are not idol worshippers, because they have developed only the idol worshipping as the most important aspect in Buddhism. Through their human emotion and devotion, they developed some superstitious belief and started to erect various kinds of images according to their mythological belief by depicting many faces, many hands, many eyes, and many heads to satisfy their imagination and their worldly needs. That is why today we can see various shapes of images with disfigured features. All these images depict the poor mental attitude of those who introduce such Buddha images. The time has come for people to minimize the number of such images and to keep a normal image of the Buddha, for them to recall the Buddha and pay respect to, maintain the good name of Buddhism. We can introduce Buddhism through our culture, but one should not introduce culture as Buddhism. Another big problem is the performance of rites and rituals by different ethnic groups according to their age-old traditions while practicing Buddhism as their religion. There is no doubt that some of those practices are insignificant in modern society and modern education. Many people are not ready to appreciate some of those practices. This we can see during the Chinese funerals and some other ceremonies which they perform a few days after the funeral by spending a few $1,000s. Many people mistake or misinterpret these practices as a part of Buddhist practices. Having seen such ceremonies, certain unscrupulous missionaries take advantage of the situation to ridicule and condemn Buddhism and so indoctrinate people to convert them into their religions. Therefore, those who are very keen to perform such ceremonies as their cultural practices may do so without creating a wrong impression among the public which can cause much damage to Buddhism. The Buddha never advocated any rites and rituals but disseminated the Dhamma or reality in life. Neither did he even ask his followers to worship him by erecting images. But the followers started erecting images of the Buddha only as a mark of respect. There is nothing wrong in it. The Buddha's advice was that those who see the Dhamma can see him. Those who serve sick, serve him. Those who practice his teaching, respect him. Some Buddhists try to introduce different Buddhas by using different names. They also emphasize and single out one particular name of a Buddha to inform others the power of their Buddha. To them, that particular Buddha is the true Buddha. This kind of attitude shows their poor mentality or ignorance. They discriminate Buddhas according to their way of thinking and personal needs by judging the validity of a Buddha in a worldly sense. Whatever names people use to introduce the Buddha according to their needs, the enlightened Buddhas who appeared on this earth from time to time had no discrimination whatsoever. All of them gained the same enlightenment, the same perfection, and had expounded the same doctrine. Such Buddhas are very rare. But people create different names of Buddhas from time to time and introduce them as real Buddhas. Today, it has become a competition among the Buddhist community since they have commercialized the images of the Buddha. Buddhist publications themselves create another problem. Numerous books and booklets have been published and distributed as Buddhist literature in many parts of the world. But very unfortunately, it is hard to say whether any real teachings of the Buddha are contained in those publications. Through these publications, they create more superstitious belief and confusion. Some writers try to show their scholarship by touching upon various speculative issues according to different schools of Buddhism and ridicule the other school and attempt to show the superiority of their own school. But unbiased readers may think that they are unscrupulous intellectual fools who create more confusion among the public. If the knowledge of the basic teachings of the Buddha is shallow, the readers may lose confidence in Buddhism after reading such publications. Some others have commercialized such publications for their personal gain, but never think of the damages that they create by encouraging to mislead people in the name of Buddhism. Buddhism was originated in India, and Buddhist practices were nurtured according to Indian traditions and culture. It is only natural. But the Dhamma, or the sublime teaching that the Buddha had expounded, is not confined to Indian community, but for all mankind. He had given all the necessary advice to guide mankind into leading a noble way of life without any frontier. In his teaching, the Buddha discussed all the existing human problems and how to overcome them to maintain peace and happiness. Some people try to condemn Buddhism as an outdated, impractical, and old-fashioned religion. There is no time limit for the Dhamma taught by the Buddha. Hence, the Dhamma will remain forever as truth. Dhamma is eternal, but the practices in the name of Buddhism are changeable from time to time. Buddhism is not a theory or mythology just to believe in, but a practical and noble religious way of life. This is one of the oldest religions in human history that cultured mankind, yet most modern in every aspect when compared with other modern achievements. This religion teaches us how to cultivate our own hidden potential and use our own effort and intelligence for higher achievement or aim of life. Buddhism is a religion to understand by a thinking mind. What is the purpose of professing Buddhism if we are unable to practice it in our daily life? We must uphold our religious principles, the Buddha's message of non-violence and peace, of love and compassion, of tolerance and understanding, of truth and wisdom, of respect and regard for all life, of freedom from selfishness, hatred and violence, delivered over 2,500 years ago, a stand forever as truth. It is an eternal message. Unfortunately, many of those so-called followers of the Buddha are unworthy descendants of that great master. He was a teacher who was superior and much ahead of his time. He was a master who taught us what we should do if we want to recover our balance, our harmony, our love and friendship. We have broken up into different sects, into different communities, into different nations, and we fight and destroy one another. We are in a world torn by strife and hatred. What did the Buddha say to such people? Overcome anger by non-anger. Overcome hatred by love. Can we do it? Are we practicing the advice given by him? If a man does not practice it, he is unworthy to call himself a follower of the Buddha. According to the Buddha, those who follow such advice are his real followers. Simply by worshipping or praying to the Buddha, one cannot become a real follower. We must develop the Bodhi heart of wisdom, a heart of love, a heart of understanding. If we are to so develop ourselves, then we should be contributing our share to make the world a better place for all of us to live. It is said that although the Buddha's teachings are more than capable of maintaining real peace and happiness, certain Buddhist states are still unable to work together in concert and in harmony. We are responsible for everything. We have to cleanse our heart, scrutinize our own nature, and determine ourselves to practice and uphold the Buddha's noble teaching, both in spirit and the letter. We should make ourselves true Buddhists. Then the world will be a better place to live in. So, this is not a religion for people just to follow, but to learn, understand, and to practice to gain experience.